The second and concluding part of the Peacock Spring is tomorrow at 9:30 here on BBC1.
I miss him, I just miss him, I miss him, I miss him, I miss him. I know I shouldn't do this.
Juliet Stevenson and Alan Rickman in Truly, Madly, Deeply.
How long ago did Jamie die? Nina?
She really loved him. It's tragic.
It was like standing behind a glass wall while everybody else got on with missing me.
Another chance to see this highly acclaimed film, Sunday at 10:05 on BBC1.
The New Radio Times has Barry Norman's pick of the premieres in a 5-page film special. It also contains listings for all television and major satellite channels.
This week, the inside story of Jennifer and June. Born as twins, they raged against the world as twins, speaking only to each other in a language no one else could understand. Sent to Broadmoor together for arson and released together after a decade, they were finally separated by Jennifer's death in 1993. In this award-winning inside story, the silent twin speaks openly for the first time. Wednesday, 10:40 on BBC1.
New Year football on BBC1 in 20 minutes. Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest and Tottenham versus Manchester United in Match of the Day. And that's after the news, now on BBC1 with Hugh Edwards at 10:25.
Over 1 million people have no water supply tonight. The situation in the northeast is said to be critical. After the freeze, water pipes and mains are thawing and many are leaking badly. A warning from ministers that the Ulster Unionists will get no special treatment in return for parliamentary support. And police in Bristol hunt for clues after a man is shot dead as he tries to stop a robbery. Good evening. Water supplies in the northeast of England are severely disrupted tonight, and authorities say the situation in Newcastle and Sunderland is critical. The rapid rise in temperature after the freezing weather has left fractured mains and burst pipes. Water supplies in parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland have also been severely disrupted.
Battling to save what water they can, engineers in the northeast are working against the clock to repair mains damaged in the sudden thaw. The water company says the situation is critical. Extra staff were brought in to deal with emergency calls. 150,000 people are without water at the moment. That figure could grow to 750,000 by tomorrow. Newcastle and South Tyneside could be cut off unless the situation improves. One key problem is that reservoirs, already depleted in the summer drought, do not have enough reserve to cope with the present crisis.
It's now becoming a regional problem. It's affecting Tyneside, Wearside and now parts of Teesside. We're doing all that we can to try and sort of correct the situation, try and restore supplies, but the situation is such that people are going to see reducing pressures and we're likely to see more of our customers actually going out of supply over the next 24-48 hours.
People are angry with the water company for not giving more help.
I can't make bottles up for the baby. We need the water for the bottles. What I'm actually doing now is like using me water out the hot tap just to boil up to make us some feeds.
Some areas of Scotland have also been badly hit. In Glasgow, 4 tower blocks had to be evacuated because of fractured water tanks. This afternoon, most residents were allowed back home to clear up the mess. Tankers are being used to bring water to towns that are completely cut off. It's a similar story in Northern Ireland, where rationing has been introduced. 20% of homes in Ulster have been affected. As people struggle with a not-so-festive end to the season, they're being reminded that the only way to stop the situation getting much worse is to use as little water as possible. Triona Holden, BBC News.
The government says the Ulster Unionists won't get any special treatment in return for their support in Parliament. John Major's Commons majority is down to 5 following Emma Nicholson's defection, and some Conservatives are now talking openly about the possibility of a minority administration.
Nationalists in Northern Ireland are increasingly perturbed by the government's growing dependence on the support of the Ulster Unionists. Today, the head of the Catholic Church in the province has underlined concern that the Conservatives' dwindling parliamentary majority could interfere with the peace initiative.
It would be most unfortunate if any plausibility were to be given to the suspicion that peace in Northern Ireland would be allowed to suffer because of internal party political difficulties at Westminster.
But Sir Patrick Mayhew, the Northern Ireland Secretary, has insisted ministers will be even-handed in the peace process.
The government will do its duty according to what it considers to be right, and I recognise no difference in the essential equation by reason of events of the last few days or even a longer period.
Emma Nicholson's dramatic defection to the Liberal Democrats and the threat that more MPs might be lost has heightened speculation that John Major might only survive by leading a minority government. Jim Callaghan, the last Labour Prime Minister, survived for more than 2 years without an overall majority. Senior Conservatives think Mr Major should do the same and avoid an early election.
I think the government should go into 97. I think it has a lot of work to do to win back the necessary support to win that general election, which is why I think it should carry on. At the moment, it has a majority for confidence issues in the House of Commons, and I trust it will still be able to command the confidence of the House well into 97.
With Conservatives accepting that the Prime Minister may have to face the humiliation of heading a minority government, it's clear that the turmoil created by Emma Nicholson's defection is focusing Tory anxieties on the stark reality that the end might be in sight for John Major's administration. Nicholas Jones, BBC News, Westminster.
A man has been shot and critically injured in Northern Ireland. Police say they've not yet established the motive, but the shooting comes after a series of murders by a group calling itself Direct Action Against Drugs, which security sources believe is a cover for the IRA. The victim, who's in his 30s, had been visiting his girlfriend in the predominantly nationalist Taknevan estate in Lurgan, County Armagh, when he was attacked by 2 gunmen. Police in Bristol are hunting 4 men they describe as armed and dangerous after a man attempting to stop a robbery was shot dead and 2 others were injured. The dead man was Avon Berry, a 37-year-old caretaker who was married with 3 teenage daughters. The shooting happened in the St Paul's area of Bristol. Detectives say the gunman should not be approached.
Flowers were laid this evening outside the taxi office where the victim's body was found. He'd been shot in the head at point-blank range, but staggered here to try to summon help. 37-year-old Evan Berry was a married man with 3 teenage daughters. In a statement issued through the police, his wife Linda described him as a kind and gentle person. Mr Berry was secretary of the Malcolm X Community Centre in the heart of St Paul's. The building was closed tonight as a mark of respect. Detectives say Mr Berry and 2 others were attacked by a gang of 4 men, all black, as they tried to intervene in a street robbery. The shootings happened as they left a New Year's Eve party at this pub. One of Mr Berry's friends was shot in the side, the other was pistol-whipped. Extra officers joined the investigation as the police intensified the search for clues.
I just thought somebody was having a real good old fight. But then when I heard the banging, I thought, oh God, is that fireworks crackers or... But then I was told it was guns, so of course it makes you a bit frightened then, doesn't it?
There have been 2 other shootings in this area in the last month. Both were thought to be drug-related incidents. The police say today's attackers were probably from outside the area and may be carrying more than 1 weapon.
The main thrust of this is we are just so surprised at the level of violence offered at such an early stage. There's no suggestion there was any more than a street robbery. Drugs don't seem to be a part in this at all, and we are desperate to get information.
The taxi company premises remain cordoned off by the police in preparation for further detailed examination by forensic scientists tomorrow. As the hunt continues for the gang responsible, the police have warned the public that they're extremely dangerous and must not be approached. Of the 2 men injured during the attack, 1 has been discharged from hospital and is now staying at a secret address. The other is under armed guard tonight in hospital and is expected to be interviewed by detectives tomorrow morning. Paul Newman, BBC News, Bristol.
There's been an excellent response to a police appeal for information about the missing teenager Louise Smith. She was last seen leaving a nightclub near Bristol at 2 a.m. on Christmas Day. Last night, police interrupted the music at the club to hand out leaflets and to ask for information from those celebrating New Year's Eve. Coach operators have condemned a new law which bans coaches from travelling in the outside lane of motorways. They say it's likely to cause more accidents. The 2-year experimental ban started at midnight, and coaches will also have their speed limited to 65 miles an hour.
Until last night, this express coach service from Bournemouth to London could legally pass slower-moving heavy lorries or caravans on the M3 motorway by moving into the outside lane. So even if both the inside lanes were obstructed, there was no delay. But since midnight, it's been a different story. Although motorway traffic earlier this morning was light, the coach was regularly caught behind heavy lorries sticking rigidly to their slower limit of 56 miles an hour. Even if they moved aside, other motorists were nervously hogging the middle lane and ignoring the flashing headlights. Coach firms say the new rule won't simply disrupt timetables, it's also dangerous.
You can have a heavy goods vehicle followed by a coach, followed by another heavy goods vehicle.
All very close together?
All travelling very close together and all travelling at 56 miles an hour.
Yeah.
When a truck hits an incline, it immediately slows. Now the effect of that is that if an accident is caused, you have a truck behind a coach pushing a coach into the back of another truck.
Lorry drivers are very well used to the idea of not being able to use the outside lane of the motorway, and we have no evidence that that causes any particular road safety hazard at all. I don't see why the situation will change when buses are also restricted from using the outside lane.
The experiment is due to last 2 years, but if it is blamed for a motorway pile-up, there'll be a public outcry. Christopher Wayne, BBC News.
King Fahd of Saudi Arabia has transferred control of the government to his half-brother, Crown Prince Abdullah. The king, who's 73, had a stroke in November and says he wants some rest. The new arrangement is said to be a temporary measure, but it's thought unlikely that the king will resume his full duties. Prince Abdullah is regarded as a traditionalist with views similar to the king's. Bosnians have been celebrating a peaceful new year after nearly 4 years of civil war, and NATO troops also joined in the partying. But the Americans have had further problems with a temporary bridge they've built to deliver most of their equipment to Bosnia.
The guns opened up at midnight, only this time, if not in peace, at least in celebration. The first new year in Bosnia for 4 years that did not dawn in the immediate shadow of war. British soldiers, formerly with the United Nations, now under NATO command, were among those celebrating, before going back to their new mandate of making the peace work. In just a few weeks, the situation has been transformed here, and the Americans are a part of that transformation. They made it happen. The first few hundred of their 20,000 troops have arrived on Bosnian soil across the Sava River. They were delayed by the weather. Most of their armor has still to make it over. But their presence should make the difference. One thing all sides are agreed on is that if this doesn't work, nothing will. And 1996 will be Bosnia's year of decision. Martin Bell, BBC News, Tuzla, Bosnia.
The late Harold Wilson, in his early days as Labour Prime Minister, hatched a remarkable plan to get back all the money stolen in the Great Train Robbery. Cabinet papers from 1965 released today also show he considered invading Rhodesia when that country illegally declared independence.
Even though it was 2 years after the Great Train robbers made off with £2.5 million, the records released today show the new Labour government devoted considerable energies to getting the money back. Harold Wilson, an economist by training, proposed stripping the gang of their ill-gotten gains by withdrawing all banknotes in circulation and issuing new ones, either catching the robbers when they turned them. On the international stage, Harold Wilson found himself virtually powerless to counter the refusal of Rhodesia's white minority leader, Ian Smith, to move to a multiracial democracy.
I don't believe in black majority rule ever in Rhodesia, not in 1,000 years.
After Smith illegally declared independence, Wilson imposed sanctions. boasting they'd bite in weeks rather than months, but secretly, the government estimated they'd take up to 18 months to work. Britain's Foreign Secretary privately argued that force should be used or the problem handed over to the UN. Wilson rejected both options. The papers also reveal a radioactive leak from the Holy Loch nuclear submarine base was hushed up for 4 months because the US Navy feared hostile publicity. With public sentiment over the Vietnam War growing, ministers said privately the risk of anti-American agitation had to be kept to a minimum.
Love, love me do. You know I love you.
It was the year Wilson gave the Beatles the MBE, as he projected himself as a premier in tune with the swinging 60s. But as he played the showman, officials were warning him the economy was on the brink of the abyss. Martin Dahl, BBC News.
And that's all from the BBC Newsroom tonight. Good night.
Hello, good evening. Now the main stories from the Look North newsroom. Rescue attempts have been continuing today along the east coast to save dozens of seabirds who've been washed ashore covered in oil. It's the second time in recent months that birds have been found along a stretch of coastline between Bridlington and Spurn Point. Some have died, but others are still alive.
Not that we've seen today, it's been out a lot. You got 4 yesterday. Yeah.
All day, RSPCA inspectors have been responding to calls from the public who found distressed birds, their feathers covered in oil. But these birds are the lucky ones because they've been found. The oil clogs the feathers, and without treatment, the birds would certainly die. So far, 150 have been found, the result of a ship illegally flushing out its tanks at sea.
Here we are on January the 1st, 1996, the start of a new year, and here we are along with members of the public trying to save these birds. It's certainly a sad start to the new year and not one that I would have hoped for.
Only 4 months ago, thousands of birds at Flamborough Head were killed by oil from a wreck. The continuing threat of fatal pollution worries RSPCA officials. For every bird saved, they can only guess at the number that die at sea and sink without trace.
Police on Humberside have launched a second murder inquiry after the body of a man was found in Hull in the early hours of this morning. 6 people are being questioned by detectives. Officers were called to Fairburn Close on the Bransholme estate after a disturbance. 31-year-old Michael Sutherland had been stabbed. Over the weekend, detectives launched a separate investigation into the murder of a pensioner. 70-year-old Fred Barnett was found dead in his home in Hull. Roger Meare, the Derbyshire explorer, was forced to give up his walk across the Antarctic just before Christmas, has said that he'll try again after his Norwegian rival abandoned his attempts to cross the polar cap. Brooke Osland had to give up his solo walk because of frostbite. Meare says that he'll make another attempt in December. Bells across Yorkshire rang in the new year, but the city of Bradford celebrated in silence. The bells at City Hall fell quiet because they need costly repairs, but now the council's resolved to find the money to allow the bells to chime once more.
This is what Bradford's bells used to sound like. For the 3rd year running now, the familiar chimes have been silent as the city ushered in the new year. But after more than a century, the elements and the passage of time have taken their toll.
As you can see, the frame itself is made out of a crucifix of oak, which also has some steelwork which is there to support it because of the failure of the oak due to the bad weather over 120 years.
Now it's Bradford's New Year's resolution to find the money so the bells can chime once more. Many in the city hope repairs can be carried out so Bradford's bells can ring in 1997.
And that's all from us this evening. We'll be back again tomorrow morning in our usual pattern with the first bulletin of the day at 6:25, if you can join me then. Good night.
Good evening to you. Well, evidence on the news that higher temperatures are not necessarily good news with all the broken pipes across the country. And now we're seeing extensive mist and fog like this, especially over central and eastern parts of Britain. Obviously a real hazard if you're out and about on the roads tonight. And there'll be some pretty dense patches of fog around as well, especially over England and East Wales. Also some pockets of rain and drizzle, so all in all it's a pretty damp and dreary scene across the country. Still some sleet and wet snow across those northern hills moving up into Orkney and Shetland through tonight. Now the change is still coming along very slowly from the south. The milder weather is gradually pushing northwards. It's pushing that cold air out of the way. But as you can see here, hardly an isobar to be seen across the south come tomorrow afternoon. That does mean to say that fog will remain a problem and become more extensive again tomorrow night. Well, we've seen some heavier bursts of rain moving up through Scotland in the past few hours, a line of heavier rain through Ireland, just off to the southwest of England too, with some more persistent rain pushing eastwards through the Channel Islands. That will continue, and all in all, very little change through the night. Patches of rain and drizzle almost anywhere, but the heavier rain probably pushing away northwards by breakfast time. Now, by and large, temperatures will be 2 or 3 degrees above freezing, but just here and there, especially on the higher level roads, in some central parts of England too, there could just be the odd icy patch around. Well, here are the winds, and you can see very slack gradients, as we call them. Very light winds indeed across England and Wales for much of Tuesday. A freshening breeze, though, coming in from the west later in the day. So looking at Tuesday morning then, a pretty gloomy scene once again. Very misty out and about if you're off to work. Some sleet and wet snow up in the far north of Scotland. There'll be a few brighter spells developing, especially where you've got higher ground to the south of you. So perhaps over parts of the West Country into Wales. A bit of North Highland region come the afternoon, things will cheer up a little bit. And temperatures just nudging a little bit higher all the time. Maybe 9 degrees over in Northern Ireland, typically 5 or 6 elsewhere. That weather system coming in from the west and a strengthening wind means some wet weather into Northern Ireland and western Scotland during Wednesday, but some very foggy conditions further east. That should clear away on Thursday though as the breeze picks up and outbreaks of rain move east. That's it from me.
Anyone smell burning round here? One boy's dreams of heroism.
I'm not gonna quit, Stephen, you hear me?
And the hell on earth that is the backdraft.